Why? The chemical stench of deployed airbags stung my throat as I regained consciousness. Glass crunched under my boots like winter ice. My son, Cole, why? Sat in the back seat with wide, empty eyes. Darcy lay slumped against the dashboard, her breathing shallow and ragged. Why? I scrambled for my phone through the wreckage of the dashboard. After my wife, my son, and I, Brian, got in a serious accident. Why? I texted the family chat. We're in the hospital. My wife is in the ICU. Nobody said anything. Then my sister replied, I hope she dies. She's always been such a witch to me. So, I made sure they regretted it. The hospital lights hummed with a sterile, mocking indifference. Why? I sat on a rigid plastic chair, watching the surgeons move behind frosted glass. My phone buzzed in my palm, glowing with a new notification. Why? It was a photo of a 3-tier birthday cake covered in pink glitter. My mother had liked the post. My father had commented with a heart emoji. Why? They were all there, just 4 miles away, celebrating my niece while my wife's spleen was being removed. Why? Not one of them asked if Cole was still breathing. Vince arrived an hour later, carrying a bag of lukewarm burgers and a heavy silence. Why? He didn't share my blood, but he held my hand steady when the tremor started. He saw the group chat glowing on my lap. Why? His jaw tightened until I heard the bone pop. He didn't offer empty platitudes about family being complicated. Why? He just watched the screen as my sister posted a selfie with a Disney princess. The caption called it the best day ever. Why? My father was in the background, wearing a plastic crown and laughing at something on his own phone. By the third day, why? The doctors moved Darcy to a private room. She looked fragile, a porcelain doll held together by tubes and tape. Why? My father finally called, while I was brushing the dried blood from her hair. He didn't ask about the surgery or the internal bleeding. Why? He asked if I had dropped the mortgage check in the mail yet. He said the bank didn't care about accidents. I looked at the deed in my bag. Why? The legal document they had signed away years ago. They had forgotten who actually owned the roof over their heads. I met my attorney, Harlow, Law Y, in a quiet corner of the cafeteria. The paperwork felt heavy, a stack of legal lightning waiting to strike. Why? He confirmed that the quitclaim deed was ironclad. My parents were technically month-to-month tenants in a house I had fully funded for 3 years. Why? Every cent I poured into their comfort was a gift they had spit on. I signed the formal eviction notices with a steady hand. Why? Harlow looked at me with a grim sort of pity. He asked if I was sure about this. I told him blood was just a liquid. Why? The drive to the house in Independence felt like a funeral procession. Why? I stood on the porch and listened to the muffled sound of a game show blaring from the television. My mother answered the door. Why? Her face tightening into a mask of practiced annoyance. She asked if I was there to fix the leaky faucet in the guest bath. Why? I handed her the envelope without saying a word. She pulled out the legal notice, her eyes darting across the bold text. Behind her, why? Haley walked into the hallway, clutching a brand new designer handbag I had unknowingly bought for her. Why? The living room smelled of burnt coffee and cheap floral candles. My mother gripped the eviction notice, her knuckles turning a waxy white. Why? Haley stood behind her, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't look like a sister. Why? She looked like a predator. I felt the ache in my bruised ribs flare with every breath. The silence stretched until it became a physical weight. Then, why? My mother let out a sharp, jagged laugh that rattled the window panes. You can't do this, Brian, she said, her voice dropping to a low hiss. Why? She stepped toward me, waving the paper like a flag. We raised you in this house. You owe us more than a piece of paper. I didn't blink. Why? I remembered the text message on my phone. I remembered Darcy lying in that cold, white hospital bed while they ate cake. Haley crossed her arms, her new handbag swinging from her wrist. She looked bored by my sudden display of backbone. It's just a dramatic stunt. Haley sneered. Why? Stepping closer to my mother. Hayes just upset because we didn't drop everything for Darcy. Why? He always was a sensitive little brat. Her words were sharp needles under my skin. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Why? I hit play on the recording of the call from 2 days ago. My father's voice filled the room, demanding money while Darcy was in surgery. Why? The smirk on Haley's face finally began to flicker. My mother looked at the phone as if it were a coiled snake. The recording continued. Why? Capturing her own voice laughing in the background of that call. The power balance shifted in a heartbeat. They realized I hadn't just been mourning. Why? I had been documenting. The room felt smaller now, crowded by the evidence of their indifference. Haley reached for her bag. Why? Her hands shaking slightly. She wasn't bored anymore. She was looking for a way to bite back at me. That's illegal, Haley whispered. Why? Her face draining of color. I stepped back, maintaining the distance the deputy had suggested. Why? Recording people without their consent is a crime. I shook my head slowly. Missouri is a one-party consent state, and I was the one consenting. Why? My attorney had been very clear about the rules of engagement. I watched my mother's eyes dart toward the stairs. She was looking for my father. Why? But he was still hiding in the bedroom upstairs. You have 60 days. I said, my voice sounding hollow in the familiar hallway. Why? Find a place that fits your budget. This one is officially close to you. My mother began to wail, a high, thin sound that lacked any real grief. Why? It was the sound of a cornered animal realizing the trap had finally snapped shut. Haley didn't cry. She just stared at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I turned toward the door, feeling the cold air outside. I walked down the porch steps, the wood groaning under my weight. Why? My neighbor Julia was standing by her fence, watching the scene with a grim nod of approval. Why? I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel until my hands went numb. I checked my phone and saw a new message from a number I didn't recognize. Why? It was a photo of my front door back at my own house. Someone had keyed the word traitor into the paint. Why? I drove home with my heart hammering against my bruised ribs. The word traitor glared from my front door, carved deep into the white paint. Why? I didn't call the police yet. I needed to see Darcy and Cole first. The house was quiet, smelling of the lavender soap Julia used. My son was asleep. Why? Clutching a plastic dinosaur. I checked the windows, ensuring every lock was engaged. The threat felt closer now, moving from words to cold. Why? Hard steel. I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the security app on my phone. The screen flickered as the front porch light caught a moving shadow. Why? It was a man in a hooded sweatshirt lingering near my driveway. I zoomed in, but the face remained hidden in the gloom. My objective was simple. Why? Keep my family safe while the eviction moved forward. But the pressure was rising. They weren't going to leave quietly. Why? They wanted to burn everything I loved. The shadow moved toward the garage, carrying a heavy metal canister. Why? I realized with a jolt that it was gasoline. I stepped onto the porch, my flashlight cutting through the night like a blade. The figure froze. Why? Dropping the can with a loud, metallic thud. He turned to run, but his foot slipped on the wet grass. I saw his face clearly under the beam of light. Why? It was Todd, Haley's husband. He looked terrified, not vengeful. I realized he was caught between his wife's madness and his own fear. Why? An unwilling accomplice to her spiraling rage. She made me do it, Brian. Todd sobbed, staying on the ground. He didn't try to fight. Why? He looked like a man who had been hollowed out by years of Haley's demands. She said if I didn't scare you. Why? She'd take the kids and disappear. I kept the light on his face, recording everything with my phone. This was the turn I needed. Why? Todd wasn't an enemy, he was a witness. He was the crack in their united front. I told Todd to stay put and called the police. He sat on the curb. Why? Head in his hands, smelling of premium unleaded fuel. I realized Haley wasn't just lazy, she was dangerous. Why? She was willing to burn down a house with her nephew inside to save her lifestyle. The police arrived within minutes. Lie. Their red and blue lights reflecting off the carved door. They took Todd into custody, and he started talking immediately. He gave them everything. Why? The officer took my statement while the sun began to peek over the horizon. I felt a strange sense of relief, despite the gasoline on my driveway. Why? Todd's confession would link Haley to the vandalism and the attempted arson. The legal net was tightening around her. Why? I went back inside and found Darcy standing in the hallway. She looked pale but steady. She had heard everything. She took my hand. Why? Her grip surprisingly strong. We were finally fighting back. We spent the morning installing extra cameras and a reinforced deadbolt. By noon. Why? My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown contact. It was a link to a local news site. Haley had been arrested an hour ago at my parents' house. Why? The headline mentioned child endangerment and felony intimidation. I felt a cold surge of victory. Then I scrolled down to the bottom of the article. Why? My father had been hospitalized after a heart attack. The news of my father's heart attack felt like a lead weight in my stomach. Why? Guilt tried to claw its way up my throat, but the memory of the hospital chat stopped it. I had a clear objective. Why? Maintain the eviction without caving to emotional blackmail. My mother called 10 times in an hour, her voicemails a chaotic mix of sobs and curses. Why? She blamed my legal actions for the strain on his weak heart. I drove to the hospital, not for him. Why? But to ensure the legal process remained untainted. The intensive care unit felt hauntingly familiar. Why? The same rhythmic beeping echoing through the halls. My mother sat in the waiting room, her eyes red and sunken. She looked older, smaller. Why? And desperately frail. The pressure to drop the charges against Haley was immense. Why? She begged me to forgive the family before my father passed away in that cold room. He needs to know we're okay, Brian. She pleaded. Why? Clutching my sleeve, with bony fingers. I looked at her hand, and saw the gold ring I had paid for 3 years ago. Why? The turn came when a nurse approached us with a clipboard. She asked if I was the primary contact for the insurance policy. My mother went silent. Why? Her gaze shifting to the floor. I realized then that they had used my name for his medical intake. Why? They had forged my signature on the financial responsibility forms during the admission process, while I was busy with Darcy's recovery. Why? The power balance shifted as I looked at the forged documents in the nurse's hand. I wasn't just their landlord. Why? I was now their unwitting benefactor, for a massive medical debt. My mother's frailty suddenly looked like a calculated performance. Why? She had planned this secondary trap the moment the eviction notice arrived. They never intended to leave. Why? I took a photo of the forged signature and called Harlow immediately from the hallway. My attorney's voice was cold and clinical over the line. Why? He told me this was identity theft, a serious felony that would override any family loyalty. Law, why? I walked back into the waiting room and stood over my mother. I didn't raise my voice, but the intensity made her flinch. Why? I told her the hospital would be notified of the fraud by morning. You're choosing money over your father's life. She hissed. Why? Her mask of grief finally slipping away. I shook my head and told her I was choosing the truth over their lies. Why? I left the hospital without seeing my father, the air outside smelling of coming rain. The eviction clock was still ticking. Why? But the stakes had moved beyond property. I was now a witness in a criminal case against my own parents. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Haley. Why sent from a burner phone inside the jail. She said she had a secret about Darcy that would change everything. Why? My heart skipped a beat as I read the cryptic message twice. I looked back at the hospital entrance, wondering how many more layers this betrayal had. Why? Darcy was waiting at home, but the air between us suddenly felt thin. Haley claimed Darcy had been planning to leave me before. Why? I stared at the burner phone screen. Haley's text felt like a serrated blade. I had to know if Darcy lied. I entered the kitchen. Why? Darcy was sorting pills. Her hands shook. I showed her the message. She went quiet. The air grew heavy. She reached for a hidden folder. Why? She handed me legal papers. They weren't divorce filings. They were restraining orders against Haley. Darcy had been protecting me. Why? She hid their threats for years. I saw my sister's handwriting. Haley had stalked us. Darcy kept silent to save my peace. Then my phone buzzed again. Why? The folder in my hands felt like lead. Darcy watched me, her eyes brimming with a tired, ancient grief. Why? I flipped through the pages and saw a map of my own blindness. Haley had sent letters to Darcy's workplace for months. Why? She threatened to report Darcy for medical malpractice if we didn't keep the money flowing. Darcy had paid her off in secret to spare my feelings. Why? I realized my wife had been bleeding out emotionally while I played the happy provider. The betrayal was total. Why? I walked to the window and watched the rain streak the glass. My objective was clear now. I had to end Haley's leverage once and for all. Why? I couldn't just evict my parents. I had to dismantle the entire network of lies. Why? The pressure intensified when my phone buzzed with a video file from an unknown number. It was Haley, sitting in a police interview room. Why? She looked at the camera and smiled. She claimed she had proof of Darcy's secret bank account. I felt a cold dread. I turned to Darcy. Why? Holding the phone out like a weapon. She didn't flinch or turn away. Instead, she took her own phone and logged into a bank app I had never seen. Why? The balance was nearly $50,000. My heart plummeted, thinking Haley was right about the deception. Why? Then Darcy scrolled down to the transaction history. Every single deposit was a reimbursement from her own inheritance. Why? She had been saving it for Cole's college fund. She was the only one actually planning for our future. Lie. I didn't tell you because you would have given it to them. Darcy whispered. Her voice was thin but steady. Every time they cried. Why? You reached for your wallet. I had to protect something for our son. The power balance in our marriage shifted in that heartbeat. Why? I wasn't the strong protector I imagined myself to be. I was the leak in the boat she had been desperately plugging. I sat on the floor. Why? My pride finally crushed. I called Harlow and told him to include Darcy's evidence in the criminal filing. Why? We were going for full prosecution on the identity theft and the extortion. The primary obstacle was my mother. Why? who was currently at the police station trying to bail Haley out. In-law. Why? She was using my father's supposed heart attack as an emotional shield to gain sympathy from the desk sergeant. Why? I needed to get there before she succeeded. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, my resolve hardening into iron. Why? The police station smelled of wet wool and floor wax. I saw my mother at the counter, her face a mask of tragic suffering. Why? She was telling an officer that I was a vengeful son who hated his own kin. Why? I walked up and placed the folder of restraining orders on the granite surface. The officer looked from the papers to my mother's shifting eyes. Why? The turn was immediate. Her tragic mask crumbled into a snarl of pure rage. She realized the game was over. Why? You're destroying this family for a dental hygienist. She spat. The officer's eyebrows shot up at her sudden vitriol. I didn't respond to the bait. Why? I simply asked the officer to check the signature on the bail bond application. My mother had tried to use my credit line again to free Haley. Why? The officer looked at the screen and then back at her. He asked her to step behind the counter. Why? She had just committed fraud in the middle of a police station. They led her away in handcuffs while she screamed my name. The sound echoed through the sterile lobby, but it didn't move me. I felt a strange, hollow peace as the doors closed behind her. Why? Haley was still in the back, and now my mother would join her. My father was alone in the hospital, but he was no longer my responsibility. Why? I walked back to my car, the rain finally letting up. I had severed the final tie. It was finished. Why? I returned home to find Vince sitting on my porch with a shotgun across his knees. He had seen a dark car circling the block while I was gone. Why? He didn't say anything, just nodded toward the street corner. I saw the vehicle idling under a broken streetlight. Why? It was the same sedan Todd had been driving before his arrest. Someone else was behind the wheel now. The pressure hadn't disappeared. Why? It had just changed hands. I realized the family had more allies than I thought. We stayed awake all night, watching the monitors in the kitchen. Why? Darcy slept on the sofa with Cole tucked under her arm. The car stayed at the corner until the sun began to rise. When the light hit the windshield. Why? I finally saw the driver's face. It wasn't a relative or a friend. It was the father of the drunk driver who had hit us. Why? He wasn't there for the money. He was there for the witness. The two worlds were finally colliding. Why? The sedan at the corner remained motionless as the morning fog rolled across the driveway. I gripped my coffee mug. Why? Feeling the heat seep into my bruised palms. My objective was to neutralize the threat from the driver's father before the trial began. Why? Vince shifted the weight of his weapon, his eyes locked on the windshield across the street. Why? The pressure was suffocating because the police were busy processing my mother. We were on our own for now. I saw the driver's door open slowly. Why? A tall man stepped out. He wore a tailored suit that looked out of place in our quiet neighborhood. He didn't look like a thug. Why? He looked like a man with deep pockets and no soul. He started walking toward our porch with a slow, deliberate stride. I stepped outside to meet him. Why? Leaving Vince in the shadows of the doorway. The air was biting and sharp against my skin. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at me. Why? His eyes were cold, reflecting the gray winter sky. My son is facing 10 years because of your testimony, he said, his voice a calm, low vibration. Why? I didn't flinch or offer him a way in. I told him his son should have thought about that before drinking half a bottle of rye. Why? He pulled a thick envelope from his coat pocket and held it out. It was the scene turn I expected but dreaded. He wasn't there to kill me. Why? He was there to buy me. The power balance shifted as he named a staggering number. Why? The envelope contained more cash than I had earned in 5 years of logistics work. Why? It was a life-changing amount of money that could fix everything for Darcy and Cole. I looked at the house where my family slept. Why? Then back at the man's smug face. The pressure to take it was a physical force in my chest. If I took it, the family debt vanished. If I took it, why? The trial went away. He smiled, sensing my hesitation in the long silence. He thought every man had a price. I reached out and took the envelope. Why? Feeling its heavy, illicit weight in my hand, his smile widened, a flash of white teeth in the dim light. Why? He thought he had won another soul for his collection. I turned it over and saw the bank seal on the corner of the paper. Why? Then I dropped it onto the wet pavement at his feet. The smile vanished instantly. I told him my wife's life wasn't for sale at any price. He looked down at the mud staining the paper. "You're making a very expensive mistake, Brian," he hissed, his composure finally starting to crack. Why? I stepped back and pointed to the small camera hidden in the porch eaves. Why? I told him he had just attempted to bribe a key witness on high-definition video. The power shifted again as he realized he had walked into a trap. Why? He looked at the camera, then back at the envelope in the dirt. He was no longer the hunter. He was just another criminal on my feed. Why? He retreated to his car without picking up the money. I watched the taillights disappear into the mist, my heart finally slowing its frantic pace. Why? Vince stepped out and kicked the envelope into the gutter, leaving the evidence for the police to find. Why? I went back inside to find Darcy awake and sitting at the table. She had heard every word through the open window. She didn't ask about the money. Why? She just pushed a glass of water toward me. We were still standing. The police arrived an hour later to collect the video and the cash. Why? They told me the man was a known fixer with a long history of witness tampering. This was the final nail for the drunk driver's case. Why? I felt the weight of the year finally starting to lift. I checked the news and saw that Haley's bail had been denied. Why? My mother was being held on a separate fraud charge. The storm was passing. I looked at Darcy and saw her smiling. Why? We spent the afternoon packing the last of Cole's toys for our weekend trip to the coast. The house felt lighter. Why? The carved word on the door now covered by a fresh coat of paint. I checked my phone one last time before heading to the car. Why? There was a new message from the hospital in Blue Springs. My father had regained consciousness and was asking for me. Why? He claimed he had a message from my grandfather. I deleted the text and threw the phone into the bag. The morning sun cut through the kitchen window. Why? Lighting the steam from my coffee. My objective was simple: leave the wreckage of my old life behind forever. We were heading toward the coast. Why? A place where the air didn't taste of hospital bleach. Darcy moved with a steady grace, her physical therapy finally paying off. Why, though the scars from the accident still pulled at her skin. She packed the last of the sandwiches into a blue cooler. Cole sat on the floor. Why? Lining up his plastic dinosaurs for the long trip. Peace felt possible. Why? We reached the outskirts of town when the radio broadcast interrupted the music. The news anchor spoke of a massive fire at the county jail. Why? My pulse quickened as she mentioned the female wing. Haley and my mother were both in that facility. I gripped the steering wheel. Why? My knuckles turning bone white. The highway stretched out before me, offering a clean escape. I wanted to keep driving into the horizon. Why? but the smoke in the distance pulled at my rearview mirror. The car slowed as I considered the moral weight of their survival. If they were gone, why? The lawsuits and the threats would vanish with them. It was the mid-scene turn I never saw coming. I was rooting for the fire. Why? A dark thought that finally severed my remaining guilt. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was something harder and more calculating. Darcy watched me. Why? Her hand resting gently on my shoulder. She saw the darkness flickering in my eyes and nodded. "We don't look back, Brian," she whispered. "Why?" Her voice a soft anchor. I exhaled, the tension leaving my chest in a sharp rush. We were choosing the truth over the toxic cycle of blood. Why? The fire was someone else's problem now. I pressed the accelerator, leaving the pillar of black smoke behind us. Why? We crossed the state line as the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. The road was open and empty. I felt the lie of family duty finally break. Why? The rental house sat on a cliff overlooking the churning Atlantic. It was quiet, save for the rhythmic crash of the tide below. Why? We spent the evening watching the waves, the salt air healing the last of our wounds. Darcy smiled. Why? A real expression that reached her eyes for the first time since October. I had protected them. I had won. We were a family built on choice. Why? Not obligation. I felt a profound sense of victory as I watched the stars appear. I went to the bedroom to find my charger in the bottom of the bag. Why? I pulled out my old phone, intending to wipe the memory and sell it. The screen flickered to life, showing one final missed call. Why? It was from Haley's husband, Todd. He had been released on his own recognizance after cooperating against Haley. Why? He had been at the hospital with my father. The voicemail started with a shaky sob. He said the fire wasn't an accident. Why? Haley had planned it to cover her own escape.